it's really getting them in touch with their thoughts and their habits and behaviors that they're not even noticing that they do on a daily basis. And once they're aware of what those patterns are, is when we could start to change the pattern and also change the self-talk, change the conversation. As an example, I had a client that we were doing a call the other day, and she's now starting to be aware of the thoughts in her head, and she was eating, and I teach my clients to eat till content versus full. And as she's eating, she was about to take a few more bites, and she heard herself say, just in case, right? I'm going to take a few more bites just in case. But because she noticed it, she then thought to herself, like, just in case of what? In case the food leaves the planet? Like, just in case of what? Like, just in case of what? Right? So you begin to realize that the thoughts in your head really make no sense, but they seem like they make perfect sense when they're in your head.
This is the Anthropology Podcast, the podcast where we optimize the bodies, brains, and lifestyles of entrepreneurs, go-getters, and world-changing innovators.
Welcome to the Anthropology Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Megan Walker. As a naturopathic doctor and anthropologist, I optimize the health and performance of badass women working to change the world as entrepreneurs and go-getters. You know, people exactly like you. Your business, body, balance, and inner badass. These are the themes we are exploring. So this thing happened in 2020 where, in an attempt to handle all of the emotional onslaught of this year, many of us turned to food as a mechanism to remedy the extent of feelings that we were experiencing. And what this did for many of us is just highlight the relationship and, frankly, the vulnerability that we have to food being an easy way to manage our feelings. My guest today, Lisa Goldberg, is a nutritionist with a specific expertise in understanding the mind-body connection to eating. She talks about emotional eating in her practice as a weight loss coach. And today we really unpacked all of the different facets and features that we need to address if we are going to start to break the cycle of emotional eating. For people who have experienced diets on and off throughout the course of their lives, this interview is entirely for you. Not only do we talk about the mindset pieces that need to be in place to break the pattern of how we are eating and how we are engaging in our relationship with food, but we also start to break down some tactics and techniques and conversation starters as we engage with family, in particular our family of origin, with respect to how we are eating and how we are choosing to honor ourselves moving forward. Lisa's philosophy is really simple. It's not about having a specific diet to lose weight. It's about addressing your relationship with food. And if this is something that you've always been curious about, I promise you will not be disappointed. It is my pleasure to introduce you to Lisa Goldberg. Lisa Goldberg, welcome to the Anthropology Podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here today.
I'm really looking forward to our conversation. And for our listeners who hang out with us on a weekly basis, you'll notice that we're really floating with a bit of a theme here as we close out 2020. And that is, we're really talking about health practices that we can use and get started with in 2021 that are really going to set us up for success. And one of the things that I have been hearing a lot from with respect to people that I work with is certainly, how do I change how I am eating as we move into this new year? How do I eat for a state of optimal health? And frankly, how do I interrupt the pattern of how I've been eating in 2020 to compensate for all of the 2020 feelings that are on the table? So Lisa, we're going to unpack those things with you, but I'm hoping before we do that, can you give everyone a background on who you are and how you got to this place in this area of expertise within your career?
Yes, absolutely. So I am Lisa Goldberg, and I am a nutritionist and a weight loss coach. And I really coach people around habit, behavior, and mindset change to help them overcome emotional eating and yo-yo dieting. And how I got into this myself was, for me, my journey started as a freshman in college. Before I blinked, in the first 2 months, I was like 20 pounds overweight. And I just tried everything under the sun to lose that weight, and I probably gained and lost the same weight 3 or 4 times. And back then it was like the Cambridge diet or the Slim Fast diet or the stewardess diet or some kind of starvation mode diet that always had me, starving and restricting and rebounding, until I figured out how to really change my lifestyle, like how to feed my body better, how to pay attention to my hunger, how I got into exercise. And that was really what made the difference for me to kind of get out of the, yo-yo dieting cycle. And so now what kind of really got me into this work, besides my own personal experience, because I just remember when I was, gaining and losing the weight. And of course, when I was 20 pounds overweight, I just remember I always felt terrible in my own body. I remember so many nights trying to go out with my friends, and the clothes would just pile up on the bed. And I was just like, there were plenty of nights where I just stayed home because I just felt terrible. And you don't want to go out feeling bad about yourself, right? What's the point of being out? So, I just recall so many evenings where I kind of let my life pass by because I just wasn't feeling good about myself. So that's kind of what got me into this work. So I went back to school for my master's degree in nutrition when I was 30. So I had a whole different career before I went back to be a nutritionist. I was working in retail marketing, and then I got certified as a personal trainer, which led me back to my degree in nutrition, because nutrition was something always that really interested me when I was figuring out how to lose the weight myself. And when I started my practice, I kept hearing a lot of the same thing from my clients, like, what can I eat after dinner? And I'd always say to them, well, if you just ate dinner, are you even hungry? Like, why do you need to eat anything? But so many people ask me the same question. And so I started to explore mindful eating and emotional eating. And what I recognized is there's so many people that go on a million different diets and they lose the weight, but because they don't change the behaviors and the habits and their way of thinking that got them to be overweight in the first place, the weight eventually always finds its way back. So that's kind of how I started down this path.
Well, I think you speak so many truths in that description and background, and I've listened for years to people say, well, I've always had a weight issue, I've always had whatever issue, and I think one of the things when we're really objective about it is, even for me in my own life, anytime I have something where I've always had that thing, it's usually predicted by behavior that also accompanies that thing I've always had. And the thing that backs up and is behind the behavior is the mindset piece that we bring to the table. And I love that about the work that you are doing, is that so much of it is about, let's start with mindset, which impacts behavior, which then is going to predict our outcome on the other side. How do you start? We're going to talk about the weight piece. We're going to talk about the mindset, but how do you interrupt the pattern and the conversations people have always had with respect to, I know weight's a big one and that's where you work. So with respect to weight, how do we start there?
So first, the first step in my process when I work with my clients is I have them create an awareness, because once we start doing this work, they actually start paying attention to what they're telling themselves, what they're saying to themselves. And it's the thoughts that go through your own head. And we have I read someplace we have 60,000 thoughts a day. And a lot of these thoughts are habitual because it's wired into our brain. So a habit is something that we do without thinking. So the thought has always been there. So if you're somebody who's been wanting to lose weight, most people who struggle with weight have what I call the dieter's mentality. They have a particular way of thinking. It's very black and white. They're either in or they're off, or they're in or they're out, or they're on or they're off. And with diets, there's a start and a stop. Mm-hmm. And so what I have them do initially is really get clear on what they're telling themselves, because oftentimes they don't even hear it. They don't understand, because everybody, I work with those smart, intelligent people, and they know what they should be doing, but they don't understand why they can't change this piece, this aspect of their life. And it's because they've been telling themselves the same thing for so long that they don't even hear it anymore. So once you start creating an awareness of your habits and behaviors and your thought process, you catch yourself, you see different things. So some of my clients will notice, oh my goodness, I open the refrigerator door 8 times a day. I don't get anything, or sometimes I do, but how many times I open the refrigerator door? Or I have a lot of clients recognize once they start this process, because part of the process is to get them really aware of, are they even hungry, right? So it's to teach them to even ask, am I looking for food because I'm hungry, right? How many times people think about eating when eating has nothing to do with being hungry? And so it's really getting them in touch with their thoughts and their habits and behaviors that they're not even noticing that they do on a daily basis. And once they're aware of what those patterns are, is when we could start to change the pattern and also change the self-talk, change the conversation. As an example, I had a client that we were doing a call the other day, and she's now starting to be aware of the thoughts in her head. And she was eating, and I teach my clients to eat till content versus full. And as she's eating, she was about to take a few more bites, and she heard herself say, just in case, right? I'm going to take a few more bites just in case. But because she noticed it, she then thought to herself, like, just in case of what? In case the food leaves the planet? Like, just in case of what? Like, just in case of what? Right? So you begin to realize that the thoughts in your head really make no sense, but they seem like they make perfect sense when they're in your head.
Isn't that true with so many of the thoughts we have?
Mm-hmm. Right. So sometimes I'll say to my clients, like, if you're in a place where you could just, speak it out loud, when you hear it with your own ears, you hear how crazy it was. Like when they're about to tell me, when they share with me what they're thinking, they always preface it with, I know this is going to sound ridiculous, because now they're actually speaking the words they're thinking.
Right. And it's so true how long this goes on for people. And as you were saying this, I know people in my own life, independent of my practice, where it really is. It's like, oh, I'm on diet. It's not even on a diet. I'm on diet. And as you were talking about this, I was like, it really is about shifting this language about, I'm on a diet to, this is my philosophy of eating. And I feel like even just that line of inquisition with people will start to interrupt the pattern of what's going on.
Right. First, it's noticing what the pattern is to be able to interrupt it. Mm-hmm. When I like to tell my clients, I want you to find a way of being around food and eating that feels good to you. So when I work with a client, I tell them, you are not going on a diet. You have to like the food that you eat. You can't eat food because you think it's going to help you, just because it's going to help you lose weight. You will never feel satisfied. And that's actually going on with the client that I'm working with right now. She always wants something after dinner because she's eating food during the day that she thinks she should be eating. But it's not ringing the bell. Like, your food needs to ring the bell both physically, mentally, and emotionally, or you're always going to be looking for that one more thing, regardless of whether you're hungry or not. So it's really about helping people change their relationship with food, change their way of being around food. And oftentimes, especially with women, a lot of it is, self-worth and self-esteem issues when it comes to emotional eating. But they don't even recognize that as part of the pattern.
Can we unpack that a little bit more? Like, when we recognize that as clinicians, where we're like, okay, this is a self-worth thing, how do you remedy that piece? And I think for a lot of people, there has been a placating of self-worth with food for years. That's been my experience. It's not like, oh, I finally discovered that if I have carbs, I feel better about myself. It's like, this has been a pattern that's been ingrained. But I would actually really love to unpack that self-worth piece, because I actually think that it's the gateway to, it manifests for probably a lot of your clients with respect to food. It manifests for a lot of my clients with respect to, they don't ask for enough in terms of their value or how they price things. They self-sabotage on a consistent basis. I mean, the symptoms go on and on and on, but the self-worth piece is really critical. Yeah. Somewhere along the way, the message was, and it doesn't necessarily always mean that somebody said to you, you're not good enough, right? But it's, usually it's our interpretation at some point in our life, usually as children, where we interpret a message that I'm not good enough or I'm not worthy. And that kind of gets ingrained, not just into your brain. I believe it's kind of like instilled in like our whole nervous system and just the way our brains are wired. And somehow when you live with that message of not being good enough or lack of worth, or sometimes people feel like they're not heard or their voice didn't matter. And so, part of that interpretation is, I don't matter.
it really is what goes on deep inside. And those are subconscious beliefs. So people don't walk around in their everyday life thinking I'm not worthy, or I don't matter, or I'm not good enough. But the actions that they take in their lives, how they sabotage themselves, is how it shows up. And oftentimes, like I just said to this client this morning, when we were talking about self-worth and value, because she puts everybody, her job, her husband, her children, her friends, everybody's needs before her own. And then when it comes to doing like meal planning for herself, like she can't be bothered, like she's too tired. Like, it's just me. What does it matter? And so what that interpretation is, it's saying that I don't matter. What I want matter. What I need, what I want doesn't matter. What I need doesn't matter. And it's all in the thought process. And so when people emotionally eat, they often hear themselves say, if they pay attention, what difference does it make? Right? What's the big deal? I'll be better tomorrow. Right? I don't care. I want that. Because their belief is, that this thing is really what's going to make them feel better, but it never does. It only makes them feel worse. And when they say to themselves, it doesn't matter, what they're really saying is, I don't matter. Because the it is, I always say to my clients, if you ever say, I don't have time for this, or it doesn't matter, or the heck with it, you need to change the it and the this to an I or a me. Because if you say the heck with me or I don't matter sounds completely different than it doesn't matter. And so I try to get women to recognize that they matter, what they need matters, that they don't deserve the cookies or the bag of chips. They deserve to take care of themselves. They deserve to feel better in their bodies. They deserve to respect themselves the way they respect other people, and they deserve to love themselves, as much, if not more, than they love the people in their life. And it's a lot, but when people start to do the work and they kind of keep that in their mind, they start to operate differently.
Right. And when you're having these conversations with people, do you simultaneously say, okay, here's some initial things we're going to change dietary wise while we're simultaneously addressing mindset? Or do you just you're all in on mindset until there starts to be a shift? I'm really curious about your approach around that.
Well, it really depends on what the conversation is with the client. So each person is different, right? So every conversation is different. Like the client this morning is the best example that I could use. She was telling me she was having trouble with menu planning and meal planning and, just like how to fuel her body, right? But then so we had that conversation, but the conversation shifted as she was speaking to me and talking to me about her kids and how her kids, don't really like the food that she likes. And even though her children are adults, right? They're grown adults. I was like, well, what about you, right? What about you? What do you want? What makes you happy? So we kind of can have the conversation simultaneously, but often one thing leads to the other, right? Why she's having so much trouble in the menu planning is because she's worried about other people more than she's worried about herself. Right. So it's all connected.
Absolutely. And so I'm wondering too, if you can sort of break down the connection between the self-worth piece and the self-acknowledgement piece. And there's a lot of self-work there that needs to happen. Mm-hmm. The relationship between that and this movement with respect to eating called intuitive eating. Is there a connection there? Are the two separate? How do we link these two philosophies?
Well, intuitive eating is kind of really like listening to your body. Intuitive eating, mindful eating, mindset. And so, there's like a fine line between when, self-worth and self-esteem and intuitive eating. And so people have to really, I make my clients create a big why. What do you want and why do you want it? Why is it important for you to have this? How will your life change? And I just don't mean your clothes will, get bigger or the scale will change. It's like, what kind of impact will doing this work and making these changes to change your relationship with food have on your life? And so it's keeping them connected to not just the thoughts in their head, but everything that happens, like the feelings below their neck, because oftentimes there's a disconnect, right? And so keeping them connected to the food that they put in their body has a profound effect on how they feel. It has a profound effect on their mood. It has a profound effect on their health. And so, one of the basic tenets when I work with my clients, and this is, even when, at the end, when we're done with our work, I'm just like, always remember to ask yourself, am I hungry? Mm-hmm. Pay attention to how you feel in your body. Is your body asking your food? I call it head hunger or stomach hunger. Is your stomach asking for food, right? Is it stomach hunger? Or is your head like, I feel like eating, or I think I feel like? And that's not hunger. That's not physical hunger. That's more of an emotional hunger and or a habit. So, the intuition is, what do I need to give myself right now, right? What am I really hungry for that might not be food? And so, a lot of the self-worth and the self-love is to recognize that you need something. There's a bucket that needs filling. I often say when people emotionally eat, they're trying to stuff something down or fill something up. And so I help them really explore themselves to recognize what is it that they're needing that's not food. Because that's what so many people aren't in touch with, because they're eating as a distraction of feelings or, something being empty or unfulfilled.
I can't think of a better, opportunity to start to talk about feelings in food than the one that has been presented to all of us in 2020. I'm curious, Lisa, whether you've seen in your practice a shift between people's relationships with food in this year, or you're seeing more people reach out to you, because I think we all kind of went through an extreme state of stress and unrelenting pressure this year. And I'm curious what changes you have seen in people as a result.
Yeah, well, a lot of people, there was, going around the internet, the quarantine 19 or the COVID 15, and, people were relegated to their homes, right? And so, food for a lot of people is a stress reliever, right? But for a lot of people who have stress and anxiety, they believe that food's going to make the anxiety go away. It's going to make them feel better. And or food is also used as an activity, right? Food is something to do, right? When you're bored or you don't know what to do with yourself. And so with COVID, between people being worried about, catching the virus, and not knowing what, our world was really turned upside down, right? And so, it's this strange new world that we're living in. We're all figuring out how to navigate around it. And now we're kind of, stuck in our homes, right? Closer to the refrigerator, for more hours during the day, and with everybody working from home. And so, stopping to eat something, whether you're hungry or not, is a perfect excuse as a break from your desk, as a break from the monotony. And so I've had a lot of people call me up and say, I'm 10 pounds heavier, I'm 20 pounds heavier since COVID, right? And now they need to kind of figure out, how do I kind of, undo this and get back to where I was, especially, and to learn how to live with this if I'm going to be, either cooking more from home or locked in my house. And again, it's kind of like the same steps as helping people create an awareness of what are they telling themselves when they're eating. Because I always say to people, if you hear yourself justifying why you should eat something, you probably shouldn't eat it, because it means you're not hungry. So it's a way of making yourself feel better for eating it, because typically people who eat when they're not hungry, if they're emotional eaters and they really want to lose some weight, they always feel bad about it at the end.
I'm laughing to myself as you say justify, because I have a lot, I've worked from home for a long time, so I have a lot of mechanisms in place to stop myself from just mindlessly eating. But I have found occasionally, especially in the last little while, I do engage in the justification. I'm like, this little chocolate is really good for you because it's, 80% cocoa or whatever it happens to be. So we are all guilty of this piece. Lisa, when you finally get people to a place where they're like, okay, I'm recognizing this pattern. I'm seeing that I've got some self-worth things that I've got to work on. I see that I have a relationship with food. It came from my family. Like, that's how my mom did it. All of those conversations, when that realization happens and people are like, okay, I'm interrupting it. Is there a philosophy of eating that then accompanies that next phase of someone's transition?
Yeah. So, I share with them my philosophy because I always say to people, there's nothing you can't eat. So I teach them, certain principles so they don't live their lives on a diet. And my philosophy is really how much and how often in 7 days. So I have them keep track of 7 days. And the how much and how often is if you want to indulge, and they're not treats and they're not rewards, it's like indulgences, right? So your chocolate, or, I tend to use something sweet or like an indulgent meal. Like I always use mac and cheese as an example, or fettuccine Alfredo, because I find those are really indulgent meals, things that are kind of high in fat and calories that we don't need to survive, right? But sometimes they're just so yummy that we have to have them. So how much and how often in 7 days? Once or twice in a week if you want to indulge yourself. It's not a cheat day, but it's like a meal or a dessert or something like that. It's perfectly fine. It's not going to prevent you from losing weight, and it's not going to make you gain weight. So you have to eat the food that you like. You have to enjoy what you're eating. And really kind of pay attention to, am I eating because I'm hungry? And am I stopping when I'm content versus stuffed? And so people find, and when I work with a client, it's like they tell me, how do they like to eat? So I don't tell them what they should or shouldn't be eating, but I create a meal plan for them based on the things that they like and what their life is like. And if they tell me, I don't really care if I eat carbs and I prefer not to eat them, well, then that's what we work with. But if they're like, there's nothing I want to cut out, like I love carbohydrates, so we work it all in. But again, it's really based on, how much and how often, and if you're eating appropriate quantities for your body, and it's really about teaching people how to keep the weight off by paying attention to their body, by not restricting themselves, by paying attention to their 7 days, and to kind of, really just feel the difference in their bellies and listen to what their heads are telling them, and to hear the messaging in their head. So the way that my clients really maintain their weight is because I work with people for a period of time. So most of my clients I work with at least 6 months, if not 12 months. So they start to get into a flow. They start to get into a rhythm. And what I'll always tell them, especially at the beginning when we start working together, is how you eat to lose the weight is how you need to eat to maintain the weight you've lost. So I don't want you doing anything crazy, right? Because if you can't keep up the craziness, which is what diets are, like if people tell me I could intermittent fast for the rest of my life, I'm like, if you tell me that you could intermittent fast for the rest of your life, well, then we could work it. We could work it there. But if you don't think that you want to be starving for a few hours, several hours during the day, and then you get to eat, if that's not going to work for you forever, then we need to create another plan that will.
Yeah, and I think
does that make sense?
It totally does, and I think that's where most people start. And once people, even the intermittent fasting conversation, I was talking to someone about this earlier, and it's an advanced maneuver. And I think that's the problem sometimes is we try to pull these advanced maneuvers into our starting point, and it's totally unsustainable. That's where we get the yo-yo piece. And this is what I love about the conversation you're having is listen, there's a runway and there's a philosophy of eating, and there's a mentality and mindset that people need to have in place before any of those next level conversations can start to be incorporated or explored in a fulsome or sustainable manner. Certainly what I'm hearing in terms of your approach. Go ahead, Lisa. Sorry, I don't want to talk over you.
No. I was just going to say that, most people, approach weight loss, and they begin by going on a diet. They feel like they need to cut everything out in order to lose weight. And that's part of their dieter's mentality. A lot of the clients that I work with have been on a million diets. They've gained and lost the same weight over and over. And they have this way of thinking, that dieter's mentality is, I have to be perfect. right? I can't eat anything fattening or indulgent until I lose the weight because I'm not supposed to. They have a way of thinking, a way of speaking. I shouldn't eat that. I'm not supposed to eat that. But if they just start to make like these small changes in how they feed themselves without doing anything drastic, but the mindset work and the habit and behavior change work is the part that they never do every time they try to lose weight. And it's got to go hand in hand in order for the weight loss to be sustainable.
Is your approach and conversation around alcohol the same as it is around any other thing that people are indulging in?
Yeah, because, I used to be the nutritionist on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, and I had a program for about 10 years where I fed healthy lunches to people on trading desks. So alcohol was a conversation that came up often, and I knew I'd have no business if I told those guys, well, you have to stop drinking.
Right.
So, but there's plenty of people, myself included, who, I really enjoy, some really good wine. And it's not to say that you can't have alcohol, you can, but like anything else, alcohol calories, add up just because you're drinking them, and they kind of get metabolized differently than protein, fats, and carbs in our bodies. And for most people, too many alcohol calories tend to hang out around our middles. So again, it's really just like a mindfulness of how much you're drinking. So if I have a client that tells me that they have like 10 to 12 drinks in a week, then I'll have the conversation with them where it's too much. And if weight loss is your goal, we need to figure out how to keep this in your life, but make it manageable so you get to lose weight. And it's not going to be because that amount of anything will prevent somebody from losing weight, because just the amount of calories and the way it's metabolized in somebody's body. But I try not to tell people that you have to cut all of this out of your life, because again, it's got to be something that people could sustain. I remember once working with a gentleman. He was a lawyer, and when we first started working together, he said to me, there's no way I could go to any of my conferences and not drink and yada, yada, yada. And so I was like, okay, let's just see how it goes. By the end, 6 months later, by the end of our time to work together, he had no problem going out. And if he chose to have a drink, he did. And if he chose not to, he didn't. And he was perfectly fine with it. It was as we did the work and he started to recognize that, it was just what he believed that he couldn't do. But when he actually tried it, he recognized it wasn't as bad as he thought it was going to be. Like, it didn't change his time. It didn't change the conversation. Everything was the same except for what was in his glass.
It's so interesting because I feel like this just was pervasive through my whole career. And that is, people would come back and be like, it wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. And it doesn't matter what we're talking about, frankly. Like, we build things up and we dance around them. Even something as simple as failure. Like, the way we go out of our way to avoid some of these things in life, when really we actually just step in and we're like, it was fine. I got through it. And I'm stronger.
Right. But here's the thing. It's the limiting beliefs. It's the thoughts in your head. It's if you tell yourself, I can't do this, well, then of course you can't do that because you don't think you can. And there's a fear in even attempting to try something different.
Totally. I'm wondering if we can get really practical here, Lisa, because this episode is like right smack dab in the middle of the holiday season. And one of the things that happens, and listen, I'm hoping this year that we are not gathering in huge numbers. And frankly, this is actually a year where we can start to break this habit. But one of the things I've observed in my working with patients is that we get people going, they're losing weight, they're feeling empowered. They go home and hang out with their parents or their siblings, or that, I'm going to call it the traditional environment where their family of origin, and they are derailed by months. There's mocking and bullying and all of their limiting beliefs around food, and they feel threatened. And it hasn't happened just once in my career. It is like I brace myself for the holidays and the progress people have made, because there's nothing like a family of origin to totally reset all of your limiting beliefs. And I would really love to give people some really practical strategies to, one, recognize that is a potential, and two, navigate it so that all of their hard work is not lost at such a special time of year.
Yeah, totally. I mean, so often, like I almost feel like annually I have conversations with my clients of how to navigate around going home to their families. Because when we get around our family, right, because all of this stuff is just wired into our brains, we automatically, no matter how old we are, go back into that same family dynamic. Right? Like I remember when my sister and I would go back to our parents' house and have dinner, we'd sit in the same places at the table. It's like everything would just like feel the same, but it's the way we're wired. So what I tell my clients is to really, kind of, almost like stand in your own power, like recognize that you're not that person anymore that grew up living in your parents' house, right? You're now an adult who gets to make your own decisions. And I also just tell them to practice their no thank you muscle. Right? Just practice saying no, thank you. Like if somebody, tries to get you to eat something that you don't want, right? Or somebody tries to get you to taste something that you prefer not to eat, just keep saying no, thank you. I'm good. Eventually, people are going to stop asking because there is a little bit of, sabotage that goes on within families, and people feel like they can't say no because it's rude to turn down food that somebody is offering you.
Right.
And I want to let people know it's not rude. Because the food is going in your body and you have a choice. You don't need to feel obligated to eat food you prefer not to eat. And it doesn't matter who's asking you, right? Because people create stories in their minds about how they're going to hurt somebody's feelings or what somebody's going to think. And the truth is, unless somebody tells us what they're thinking, we have no idea what they're thinking. And if you are pretty sure that you'd be perfectly fine if somebody said no thank you to you, chances are somebody's going to be fine if you said no thank you to them. But also, part of it is just to, own what you're doing, right? Own your choices. And if your siblings are trying to bully you or make you feel bad, just know oftentimes that's because it makes people feel bad about themselves. So what I find is that, especially if there's other members of the family who might be overweight or haven't been able to lose weight, and here you are taking care of yourself and making good choices, and maybe you're looking and feeling better at this point, that just makes somebody else feel bad about them, and that's not your responsibility, right? That's their responsibility.
It's not your responsibility. I love that. I mean, that's it right there. It's not your responsibility to make your mom feel good about the gluten extravaganza that she put on. It is your responsibility, probably before you get together, although please don't get together this year, to say to your mom, just want you to know I'm not eating gluten and here are some alternatives and here's how I'm going to navigate. And I love what you said that about, like, we just have to communicate these pieces, this like layers of assumptions about people's feelings. And if we actually, and I think this is one thing we've gotten better at in 2020 because everyone has different comfort levels navigating it. Your only responsibility is to just, give people that heads up. And it'll help you create better boundaries walking into that. All of this is such awesome advice, Lisa. And I feel like it's the perfect time for us to transition the nature of our interview over to something I call our KPIs. So just like we have key performance indicators in our business, I believe we have them in how we live our life as well. And so I've got some rapid fire questions coming your way so we can get some indication of the KPIs you've got in your world. Are you ready?
Okay, I'm ready.
Question number 1, what's the most impactful book or conversation that you have read or had during the pandemic?
Oh my goodness. The most impactful, well, I actually haven't read a book. I don't know why, but I haven't. The most impactful conversation was really, I think, and this opens up a whole can of worms, was really just about, when the vaccine comes out, am I going to, try the vaccine or am I not going to try the vaccine? And, the positive and the negatives and just like people's like points of view. I am open to hear, as things roll out the door, as, we get closer and closer to a vaccine.
Yes. That's a conversation starter over the holiday dinner table that will rapidly derail the conversation from food.
Totally.
Right? What is the one thing you are most consistent with respect to your health?
How I feed myself. How I it's just, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and just like how I choose to feed myself. I'm very consistent with that.
What is something totally badass about you that people would not otherwise know?
What is something totally badass about me? I'm a risk taker. I like it's just kind of like, and literally it's just, I just moved from New York City to Florida after living in Manhattan for 34 years. So it's just kind of like, you know what? It's time for a change and I'm going. And if I don't like it, I can always go back.
I find this so fun. I'm interrupting my own KPIs where normally I don't, but I find this so interesting. There is a different culture in the US than in Canada about people's willingness and ability to move. Like, you guys just move. You move all over the place. We don't here, because anywhere else you go is like snow covered, that I think we limit ourselves. But I'm always so interested when people say, I just picked up and moved. I'm like, okay. Well,
it did take me, I was thinking about moving for about 7 years. So I was like, first I was heading to California, and then honestly, it wasn't until April, right, after COVID hit, that I remembered like lying in my bed thinking, maybe Florida. And then by July, I was looking for apartments.
Crazy. What part of Florida did you land in?
I'm in Boca Raton.
Nice. Amazing.
So, and I now have a beautiful view and I'm loving life.
Amazing. What do you do for fun or play?
What do I do for fun and play? Well, I love now to go to the beach, and I love, hanging out with friends and, cooking some, well, it's a little harder now, but cooking some good food and having people over.
And last question for you, Lisa. Entrepreneurism. Are we born this way, or do we learn to become entrepreneurs?
I'm not 100% sure. My dad was an entrepreneur. He had his own business. And, I started, when I started my career, I was working for some big companies. And then I went out on my own after I got my master's degree in nutrition. And I remember, because I was feeding Wall Street around 2008 when the world fell apart the first time, I actually was thinking about going to, because I was a little nervous. I didn't know what my business would look like. I was actually thinking about going to, and I interviewed with some companies, and I was just like, I can't do this. Like, I need to stay working for myself. I'm just going to figure it out. So, I don't know if some of it is like learned or some of it is inbred. I think part of it is, to be an entrepreneur, you have to have a strong constitution. You have to be able to really just like go with the flow, because, part of, until you kind of really, figure it out for yourself, there's a bit of a roller coaster ride that you take.
Absolutely. And I love all the advice that you brought today is like the perfect kind of philosophical landscape for entrepreneurs, because it is a stressful choice. It is a different choice. But as soon as you said you're a natural risk taker, I was like, oh, you've probably got a little bit of that entrepreneurial gene in there as well. Lisa, you're up to so many great things. Where can we send people to learn more about your work?
Oh, you could send people to lisagoldbergnutrition.com. There's information on my website. There's some free resources there for people. And, they could reach me at lisagoldbergnutrition.com if they have any questions or about anything that we spoke about today or anything in general.
Amazing. Lisa, thanks so much for your time. It was a pleasure having you.
Thanks, Megan. It was really great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Anthropology is the study and science of what makes entrepreneurs tick. It's the confluence of the mindset, strategic thinking, and health that we bring to the table as contributors, as purpose seekers, as individuals building out a better tomorrow. The work that we do on the Anthropology podcast impacts the mindset, the business tactics, and the health of those individuals who are working hard to change the world, to leave a legacy for the future. The best way that we can reach more people with the message of the Anthropology podcast is if you help us share it. If the message that we shared in today's episode is something that resonates with you, or if you know someone who would benefit from hearing it, please send it to them directly. And if you have felt moved by the content that we have shared, I would love it if you could leave a review wherever it is that you pick up your podcast. Until next week, live life on, in, and with purpose. I'm your host, Dr. Megan Walker, and I will talk to you real soon.